I couldn't say no to God. And I already had an answer. And I didn't know how that was going to work out because now I'm a freshman in college and I have no financial support from my parents. I don't know how this is going to go. And it was the best decision. It changed who I was and my ability to do hard things.
In today's episode, Deb L. Brown opens up about her journey from entrepreneurship and a business failure that reshaped her faith to discovering her true calling as a writer in her 50s. She shares how her debut novel, To Have and to Hold, grew from a desire to tell stories that go beyond happily ever after, diving into how couples endure love, loss, and covenant commitment when life gets hard. We also talk about learning from failure, healing family relationships, and finding covenant joy by trusting God's direction, even when the road looks nothing like we planned. Hello, welcome to New and Everlasting, the podcast finding covenant joy in everyday living. I'm your host, Amy Beck, and I am so excited to have with me author Deb Brown. And I'm going to read a quick intro of her. Deb L. Brown writes stories that explore loyalty in marriage and faith in God in the face of life's challenges. A member of American Christian Fiction Writers and Women's Fiction Writers Association, her books handle heavy issues with a touch of humor. She's mom to her 5 children and graham cracker to her grandchildren. She lives with her husband in Minnesota. I love that graham cracker. Was that something the grandkids came up with?
Oh, no, I came up with that.
Perfect.
I feel like grandma felt like my mother. It felt like too old, which, if my mom sees this, sorry, Mom. um, But I wanted a cute grandma name, and the other grandma had the name I thought was cute. And so I was just grandma for probably a couple years, and all of a sudden it came to me, graham cracker. That is it. And my husband is Pop-Tart, and it's just so fun.
You guys need t-shirts
I know.
with your snack item and a cute anyway.
Yes. Actually, for Halloween, I made myself a graham cracker costume, and I was with my little grandson for Halloween. And so I put it on and wore it for him for their trunk or treat.
I love that so much. All right, so what else should our listeners know about you, Deb?
Yeah, so I'm a convert to the church. I joined the church when I was 18 years old, a freshman in college, only member in my family. And then I've just had, I don't know, a crazy, weird career. I graduated in elementary education, and then I had kids and stayed home. I did some things from home, like I had my own little preschool at one time. I've always been really entrepreneurial. Then I started my own business, and that led to writing a book and all sorts of crazy things. And now I'm writing fiction. So you just never know where the Lord's going to lead you.
Isn't that the truth? I think your first book was a nonfiction, lifelong loyal clients.
Yeah.
And did that had to do with the career you were in at the time?
Yeah, so I had a business that was like client appreciation and helping small business owners just take care of their clients so that they could retain them. And from that, I'd written a blog for like 7 years, and I was kind of getting coached and told, okay, I did some public speaking. They said, all right, you really need to write a book. And so I really just combined all those blogs together and wrote this book and was like, okay, let's get it out there. Great. In the end, that business ended up failing. I still have a lot of books. You can still get the book on Amazon. It's a good book, but that business ended up failing, which was humiliating, a huge disappointment to me. But now, looking back, hindsight is 2020, I can see that the skills I learned were not a failure, and they've been needed in things I've done since then.
How did you cope with the failure at the time?
Uh, I just kind of kept it inside of me. I mean, even years later, people who knew me at church and things like that, they would just ask me, oh, how's your business doing? I was like, I haven't done that for years. But, I didn't make it real public. I just kind of quietly folded down and transitioned to doing other things to bring some money in to pay off debts. And yeah, it was really humiliating to me because I had this vision of where I was going to go with this and what success meant to me. And to try everything, and I couldn't make it work. I felt like such a failure, but I don't think God had in mind for me what I had in mind for me. And he was teaching me skills that he knew I was going to need. And I probably couldn't have learned them anywhere else. And so a few years after that, I was pulled into a family business. My uncle owned an office building in downtown Minneapolis. He got sick. He needed someone to be a building manager. Like, how would I know anything about being a building manager for this commercial office building in a 100-year-old historic building? But I knew customer service, I knew marketing, I knew sales, I knew all these things from running my own business that I never could have stepped into that job had it not been for that experience. And then now I'm finding those same skills useful as a fiction writer because I still have to market and sell my book. I have to build a platform and all those things. So it's just been remarkable the way those lessons learned were not a failure. They're useful.
I was really intrigued when you brought up that theme of failure. That's been kind of simmering on the back of my mind for a while
Hmm.
because when someone succeeds at something, you're successful, accolades, you're a wonderful person, but a failure
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're a failure. And
right.
I think for a very, very long time, my identity was tied into outcomes.
Hmm.
And it took a really close examination to kind of dissect, to like kind of sever those two
Yeah.
ideas apart.
Yeah, I think so. And I heard a podcast once earlier in my fiction writing career, and the author was talking about if the only person who was affected by them writing a book was their own selves, then that was enough. And that really opened my eyes. Like, if I'm doing the thing I'm led by God to do, even though it might not be success as the world would see it, it's teaching me, helping me to grow, and maybe that's all the Lord wants, is that this is the avenue for me to learn something. And, like, I would like to be, like, the award-winning, accomplished, whatever it is for whatever career. I'd like those accolades too because of the high achiever inside me and the perfectionist that wants everything to look good, and we all make that pretty picture on the outside, our Instagram worthy image, but maybe that's not what God wanted.
I've also had to come with the harsh truth of myself that the fear of failure was I'd put up barriers around myself because I was so afraid to fail or
Yeah.
to not succeed. Yeah, and I've had to ask myself why. Why am I so afraid of something not being perfect or not
Mhm.
looking like I want it to or the outcome not being what I want it
Yeah.
to? Why is that something I'm afraid of?
I think sometimes for me, it's like, what are other people gonna think? You know, because 'cause I've built this up. You have to portray, sometimes a little bit of a fake it till you make it. You've gotta put a professional image out there if you're gonna have a business, and so, like, here, I showed everybody I tried to tell them, "I know what I'm doing, and you should follow me," um, and so what will people think? That I folded my business, that it it didn't go, even though I knew what I was talking about. I couldn't get the clients to back it up. Like, what are people gonna think?
And what did they think? Like, did anyone ever tell you what they thought? What did they think of you, Deb?
I don't know. Like, I really feel like in my business relationships, I just kind of quietly faded into the background. And And so maybe people didn't realize, but recently with this fiction book coming out, I've been reacquainted with some of those business acquaintances. And I've heard through friends that people remember me and say, "Oh, I remember her. She was so great. I loved her," whatever. So I did make an impact maybe in the relationships, and people like in my church world, I guess, are surprised. "Oh, you didn't? I thought it was going so well." Like, "Oh, all looks pretty from the outside, doesn't it?"
Tell me about your fiction book that's
Yeah.
a new release for you.
Yes, it is. To Have and to Hold. This is another God journey because who am I to start writing fiction in my 50s with an elementary ed degree? I don't know. Do I know what I'm doing? I had this thought as I was reading a lot of cute little romance novels, which are light and fluffy and happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a place for that in the market. But when I binged a whole bunch of them, I got to the end of a week or so and I was just like, I want to know what happens after the happily ever after. After these couples get together, because it seems so pretty and perfect, it's all wrapped up in a bow. But I'm at a place where I've been married over 30 years, and not every moment has been like that happily ever after in the romance novel. And so I was just curious, what is happening to these characters when real life happens and real life problems? How do they navigate that? And just knowing the world we live in and how many marriages end in divorce, I was like, are these couples even going to make it? I mean, they're fictional couples, so whatever. But I really wanted to just know how, after they've had that meet cute and fallen in love, how are they going to stick it out when it gets hard? And I said to my husband, I said, those are the books I want to read, but I don't think I'm the person to write them. But then some ideas kind of came and I jotted them down and just set it aside. And then it kept coming up over about 6 months. And at about the 6 month mark, I just went, I think I'm supposed to write the books. And so I started like reading some craft books and reaching out to authors that I knew to just try and point me in the right direction. And I dove in and I started writing. And I didn't know what I was doing. And it took me 3 years to get this first book out because it was such a learning process. And I was learning how to develop characters and plot and getting feedback from editors, which again, that's another failure thing for me. Like when I get that back from an editor, I would just feel gutted, like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible writer. I can never do this. But I just kept feeling that nudge from God that like these books need to be out there and I I gotta do it. I gotta get it done. I'm on his errand and I hope it will reach the people he wants it to reach. And if it's only me that it changes in the process, then that's going to be good enough.
It takes so much courage to acknowledge that. I had another podcast guest ask me, I used to pump out a lot of reels on my episodes. And she was like, how do you feel? Or what do you do when you don't quite get the reach that you want or your numbers aren't great? And I said, well, that is great when it does happen. But that's never why I started doing this. I started doing this because, like you writing the book, I think this is what God wants me to do. And
Yeah.
so here we are doing it. I thought it was hilarious when you're like, who am I to start writing this book in my 50s? Because when I started doing the podcast, I said, I will go and do the things the Lord hath commanded, for I know the Lord giveth no commandments to middle aged women who have no podcasting experience, save he shall prepare a way for her to do the thing
Yes.
he's commanded.
Yeah.
Yeah, so much courage. I believe I read that this is just the first of a
Yes.
series. Tell me
Yeah.
about the rest of your books or the idea, the
Well,
arch.
the idea, the concept that came to me was the traditional marriage vows to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse. Because I thought so many people go into marriage saying those vows and really believing them. But those are probably the very things that break up a marriage down the road. When things are worse, that's when you get a divorce. You know, when someone's sick and maybe you have to care for them, then that's hard to stick with. When you are poor, nobody likes that. There's unemployment and financial struggles. So I thought, what if each book in the series had a different couple and it was the opposite of whatever that vow is? And so I made this list of what would that look like? And I thought, what's to have and to hold? And I thought, well, what if you want to have a family and you don't have a baby to hold? So I wrote the first book about infertility and that struggle, which is often so silent. Nobody knows about it. And it can cause a real strain on a marriage because maybe the two partners see the answer a different way and you have to figure out how to come together. And it's hard on your faith too. All of these things are not just hard on a marriage, but they can cause people to question their faith, and I really wanted a faith element in my books because that's the other thing is I wanted to read books about people like me who when they have a problem, they're praying, they're finding answers in the scriptures, they're going to church. Like I wanted that stuff in the book. And so that's the concept and that is where the books are going.
Did it ever get hard to face the challenge of infertility through your characters?
I have not dealt with infertility, but when I read my book, and I've had to read it a lot of times to go through editing, there are parts when I do tear up because you just feel for what people go through and what these characters are going through because their goal is such a good one, and you want them to get that goal, and it's not happening, and it's just so many disappointments. So, yeah, there are moments that even I know what's coming, and I still tear up.
Browsing through your website, I was very intrigued by your Christian book club,
Mhm.
but also the fact that the story seems applicable to Christians in general, not
Yeah,
like the Latter-day Saint niche. Can
yes.
you explain why you made that decision?
Yeah, I really felt like as Christians, we have more in common than we have that makes us different. And I think there's so much division in the world in general over whether it's politics or religion or whatever. And I've just really felt strongly that we can bring people together and realize that we're more alike than we're different. And so I'm hopeful that these books cross denominational boundaries and that no matter where you are as a Christian, I mean, it's any denomination, I would hope that you would feel like, yeah, this applies to me.
Did you ever struggle to not make it to LDS? Like, I'm narrowing it too much to my personal belief system. I have to modify it or broaden it somehow.
Yeah, I don't feel like that was too hard, maybe from being a convert, like, I have that background of growing up in another church, and I have family members of other faiths, so I didn't feel like it was too hard, but I was intentional to make it biblical, and I left out the Book of Mormon or the Doctrine and Covenants, I left out our scriptures, not because they're not important, but because I wanted this to be more universal so that people wouldn't, if you're of another denomination, you wouldn't pick it up and go, "Oh, that's that's those Latter-day Saints over there. This isn't me." I feel like it needed to cross boundaries and bring people together.
I think that's really important. The that unifying factor or that
Mhm.
universal factor. So, can I ask about what was your religious background growing up, and was that hard for your family when you chose a different faith system?
Yeah, it was a really, really tough time. So I grew up First Congregational United Church of Christ, which I don't know, I just describe it as, one of those Protestant religions. If you haven't heard of it before, it's just another Protestant religion. And I was really active in my church youth group and things growing up, and then was introduced to the church by my best friend in high school right after graduation. And so started learning about the church over the summer, but kind of closeted. I went over to her house and I would learn about it. I didn't really tell my parents what was going on until I had really made my decision and I had this answer and was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do and started opening up a little bit more and my parents freaked out because they were sure I was joining a cult. They were sure I had been brainwashed and they were just ready to pull out all the stops, do whatever they could to save their child, which as a parent of adult children, I understand now because they thought I was making a really grave mistake. And so it was very tough on them, on all of us. They made some decisions to cut off all financial support and play tough love because they felt like that would convince me. And they told me, like, if it's really important to you, just wait a year. And then if it's still important, then we'll be okay with it. But for me, I felt like I couldn't say no to God. And I already had an answer. And I didn't know how that was going to work out because now I'm a freshman in college and I have no financial support from my parents. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. But I felt like I couldn't say no to God. He gave me an answer and I needed to act on it. And it was the best decision. And I think it changed who I was and my ability to do hard things. I mean, if I if I could stand up to that, then as in my 50s, I can say, "Okay, God, I'll write a novel." Like, just keep leading me. Sure, I'll try something new.
How did you heal that rift with your family?
Yeah, that was tough too, and I did a lot of things to really freak them out at that time in my life. So that was right out of high school, joined the church. And then over that freshman year, I was like, you know what? I feel like I want to go to BYU where there will be more people who believe like I do, because I was at a little Presbyterian school in Ohio and none of the other students were members of the church. So then I announced to my parents, I'm moving to Utah, going to BYU. And they're just going, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so I went out there and then met my husband. And the next year said, I'm getting married in the temple and you can't come see me. And so it was rocky. I put him through a lot. I completely will admit that's a lot for a parent to go through. And um, we stayed in contact. I was still welcome in their homes. I think that's a big part of their hospitality to allow me to come home, even if they weren't going to pay my bills, for them allowing me to come home. And then I just think as time passes and you keep trying and you give them grandchildren, then um and then hearts soften. And they're still like they have their own faith, I have my own faith, but I think now we're at a place where we respect each other and I'm not pressuring them, they're not pressuring me, and I think they realize that it was a good thing for me. They might not have thought it was going to be, they might not think it's a good thing for everybody, but they can see it's been good for me in my life and in raising my family.
Were they ever judgmental or abrasive toward your husband as you were going further and further from the way they brought you up?
Right. Yes. So after we got married, maybe years after, my husband revealed to me that when he had come to meet them that summer before we got married, I went off to work one day and my mom took him out for ice cream and tried to tell him, like, don't marry our daughter. Like, we'll pay you off. We'll do whatever if you will not marry our daughter. They kept trying whatever they could to save my poor soul, and I respect them for that. They did it out of love.
Was it hard though at the time that they weren't trusting you to make those decisions?
Yeah, in my early marriage, I really had to work through some things. I felt a lot of anger and resentment towards them because of the way they were feeling towards me and my choices. And I can remember one time just being in the temple in the celestial room and just really pouring my heart out and crying and just I needed to come to a place of forgiveness of what their actions did to me. And I think over time they've hopefully forgiven me for what my actions did to them because we both hurt each other.
We all have to offer forgiveness, extend the olive branch, and say, we're never going to be completely in sync on this,
Right.
but I still accept you. I still love you.
Yeah. Yeah.
On the flip side, as a parent, you said now that you understand what it was like to watch their adult child do these crazy things, now you're like, oh, now I see why they were so stressed out about me.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are great. But still, as a parent who has 20, 30 years experience more than they do. And when you're in that age of early adulthood, you're like, I know what I'm doing. And so sometimes you, as a parent of an adult child, can see, like, you know what? I don't think this might be the best way to run your life. And I think you could avoid some things if you'd go this way. And I'm trying, I'm learning to let them make their own mistakes and let them live their life the way they want to, because maybe it won't be a mistake, just like for me, it wasn't a mistake, you know? And we all have to learn our own life lessons and we all have our own path. I'm working on being a less controlling mother of adult children and allowing them to live their lives the way they want to.
So, the theme of my podcast is finding covenant joy in everyday living. Have you had any insights on how covenants and your covenant relationship with Heavenly Father, how has that helped you get through the failure or get through, I have this really strained relationship with my family?
One of the things I was thinking about this is the phrase think celestial. Like, if you can get out of your little niche, your little corner where everything feels like, oh my gosh, it's all going wrong, and you can get that bigger celestial view, then maybe these little things are really little things. It's not that big of a deal. When you look at the big picture and what is the big goal is not to be a best selling author. The big goal is to see my Savior again and to rest with him in the celestial kingdom. And when I'm there, am I going to care about books that I've written or it's not going to matter. And my relationships will matter for sure, but some of these things that I think are like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is such a big deal," is maybe not such a big deal. And so if you can take that more celestial view of things, you can feel a lot more peace and a lot more joy in the journey.
When I am focused on the fear, what I'm afraid of and letting that inhibit me from doing things that Heavenly Father wants me to do, but I'm just stuck. I'm only thinking about myself. When I'm just afraid of everything or afraid
Yes.
to do something wrong because I'm afraid I might fail or I might not
Uh-huh.
look like I have it together, whatever. Name your fear. They all
Right.
qualify. And I was like, "Oh, it's because I've had my spotlight is focused here
Yeah.
in that same brushstroke of thinking celestial,
Yeah.
expanding that view and turning it outward."
Yes.
I think, at least for me personally, has
Yeah.
really helped me overcome some hurdles.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant. Another thing I was thinking about with this concept of covenant joy is I had this analogy come to me about GPS systems. And I love my GPS because it helps me get places I've never been before. And sometimes it tells me to get off the road and it doesn't make sense to me. And I've done it before where I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the way I need to go. And then I've run into horrible traffic because there's an accident or construction up ahead that I wasn't able to see. But then one time I was leaving a church building that was about an hour away from where I live. And I knew when I came out of that neighborhood, I needed to turn left to go back to the freeway. But my GPS was telling me to go right. And I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to it. And I figured it would just wind me around and bring me back. But it took me a completely different route. And on this route, it was a beautiful fall day. The leaves were just gorgeous on the trees. There was this beautiful lake and this winding road. And I was just going, wow, this is beautiful. And sometimes we think our spiritual GPS, like our covenants or wherever we seek out, like through the scriptures or commandments, and we think of it as like, oh, it's going to keep us safe, which it will. And we're like, I have to follow this or I'm going to get in trouble. He's trying to keep me away from the accidents and the construction of life. But what if Heavenly Father is also making these covenants and commandments because he wants a beautiful path for us? He wants us to have that beautiful road that we go down in this beautiful, beautiful life. So I think it's a little bit of both. He's given us these covenants, these commandments to keep us safe and to help us avoid some things that we might not want to do, but also to give us a beautiful, joyful life. And if we can look at it that way, it doesn't feel so restrictive.
I always ask my guests about covenant joy. How do they find covenant joy in their life? I think you've hit on that pretty well, but I've realized lately perhaps it would be impactful to ask, how can we help others identify and find that covenant joy? Because kind of like the characters in your book
Mhm.
with the infertility struggle, and even though they're fictional, we know real people
Yeah.
who are like, I'm in the middle of this thing and I have hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
Oh, your covenant joy sparkles and rainbows.
Right.
How do we help others going through a hard spot identify that covenant joy when they're really struggling to find any kind of hope?
Yeah, that's tough because, you don't want to come in all sparkles and rainbows because when somebody's going through something hard, they just need a listening ear. They need compassion. They don't need to be told, "Oh, look for the good, start a gratitude journal." That doesn't help anyone to feel better. Starting with that compassion, but I think if we can lead by example in our own lives and be willing to be vulnerable, like saying, "Hey, I failed and it's okay." Let people see some of the messier parts of our lives without airing our dirty laundry, obviously, but to let people know. And sometimes maybe you can't let them know until you've gone all the way through it. And then you can look back and say, like now, I'm ready to say, okay, I failed, but I learned something. Um, and we can lead in that in our testimonies, in the lessons that we teach in Sunday school by being an example. And I mean, even in our online presence, if we can just not only show the good stuff, but show, hey, this was hard and I know God was with me in it, then people can say, oh, if God was with her in it, maybe he'll be with me in it too. And maybe I can find those good places.
I love that so much, especially your idea of just being empathetic. Because
Hmm.
what's one of the things that we promise in our baptismal covenant? That will
Mourn with those who mourn, comfort those who stand in need of comfort. Yeah.
precisely. And to me, just knowing that that's kind of like one of the things I promise to do to help others, but it also strengthens my relationship with Jesus Christ because I'm honoring my covenant. So I
Yeah.
just think, wow, he really knows what he's doing.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Deb. If listeners want to find you online, where should they go look?
Yeah, so my website, deblbrown.com, would be one place to go, or Deb L. Brown author at Instagram. Those are probably the best places to find me.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate your time and all of your insights and just sharing yourself and just being so open. It's been such a delightful conversation.
Thank you, Amy. I just appreciate you inviting me. I've enjoyed getting to know you and having this conversation with you.
I loved this conversation with Deb Brown, especially her reminder that sometimes God's spiritual GPS takes us on a completely different road than we expect, not just to keep us safe, but to show us something beautiful along the way. If you'd like to connect with Deb, you can visit deblbrown.com or follow her on Instagram at deblbrownauthor. And if this episode uplifted you, please take a moment to share it with a friend or leave a review wherever you listen. It helps others discover messages of covenant joy and faith in everyday life. Until next time, I'm Amy Beck, inviting you to keep walking the covenant path and finding joy in the journey.
God is good
All the time,
all the time.
God is good.